Hey guys, Jack here, and today we are doing a new series on the channel, and that is Let's Argue, where we take your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and tough questions on Twitter, and we respond to the best ones in this video. HL Nug says there will be an aggro demon hunter list that's tier 1 by the end of April. It'll be just as popular as Quest Mage in May. Now, I assume we're talking about Wild with this tweet, and I cannot get behind this. The Demon Hunter cards that are released look strong, but they don't look like there are enough strong ones for Wild. Keep in mind that every Wild deck needs 30 cards, and yes, you can get a couple good Wild cards, like if Demon Hunter was an already established class, it would probably get a lot from this expansion. But Demon Hunter is missing a lot of the core cards that make up these other classes, like Druid is always going to have Spreading Plague, Ultimate Infestation, Poison Seed, stuff like that. Demon Hunter needs a solid base, and it's going to be a couple years before it sees that sort of base in Wild. Casual Fridays says, Time Warp isn't the problem, Ice Block is. I think my response to this would just be, what decks can easily use Ice Block and not open the Waygate and are such a problem that they are the deck that needs to be nerfed? And I would say none, right? Secret Mage uses Ice Block, it's good, but it's not even a 2 of. The effect is strong, but it doesn't carry Mage by itself. Abusing Open the Waygate is really the thing that pushed it over the top, and the reason why I think it needs to be changed right now. Sam17 says, even Shaman is more skill expensive than most of other tier 1 to tier 2 decks. Few players know how to play this deck in the right way, and it's not only about Shaman, there are many high skill expensive aggro and mid-range decks. Now this is actually pretty true. There's part of this that people don't want to believe, right? They want to believe that even Shaman is easy, brain dead, but it's not true. If you watch my co-op with Memnarch, you can see there's a ridiculous amount of thinking that can go into the deck, and that may not result in a much higher win rate, but it does make a difference over the long run, and so I would say that a lot of people think they're playing even Shaman 100% right, but might only be playing it 90 to 95% right. On the other point that there are many high-skill aggro and mid-range decks, I don't think this is really the case. I think most aggro and mid-range decks are super easy to learn in Wild. In fact, even Shaman used to be one of the easiest to learn in Wild, and it was pretty darn brain dead, just play your most expensive card you can, but now with Totem Synergy, you need to play around a lot more stuff, you need to set up more things, and you need to plan turns in advance. So today's even Shaman is a bit of an exception rather than a rule, and so I would say that generally aggro decks are the easy ones to play in Wild. It is kind of hard to mess up playing things like Pirate Warrior. Bat Masil says, Duin and EK's Knuckles Hunter will be a tier 2 deck come the next expansion. Now, I haven't even seen this deck, and there's just no way. Ashley says, Renolock will be tier 1 in a month, or at least top of tier 2, you heard it here first. The problem with Renolock is not a lack of good cards, and I think a lot of people don't realize this. Now, it has plenty of good cards, but overall its strategy is just not very viable in Wild. To put in all of the tech cards so that you have something against everything, yes, you've got a game plan in pretty much every matchup, but sometimes that game plan just isn't very strong against the deck you're playing, and it just makes the deck very, very hard to play. Hijau says, current meta is one of the most skill-intensive we've ever had. Now, when people say skill-intensive, usually what they mean is two separate things. The first thing is that decks require a lot of skill to play. Now, I would say that generally this is the case right now. If you look at most of the best decks in Wild, they do require some sort of mastery to play perfectly. Quest Mage is a big one, even Shaman is another one, Reno Quest Mage, Q-Block, etc. And the second thing is that that skill that you put into those decks actually is rewarded by a higher win rate. And in terms of this question, I would say that the first is definitely true. Decks right now do require a lot of skill, but the second doesn't seem to be true at all, and it's less true than ever, which is that you are rewarded for your skill. If you look at prior metas, I would say pretty much everyone had more skill-rewarding decks than right now. Of course, Quest Mage is very difficult. Most people don't know how to play it even at the top level, and you will be rewarded for it, but also consider that a huge percentage of the time, it doesn't matter how good you play, it just matters whether or not you hit the nuts or your opponent hits the nuts. And just because you can min-max a little bit won't change whether or not your opponent draws the right cards or if you don't draw the right cards. So I would say that's a big mark against this being a skilled meta, even though the decks do require skill to play. BMKing says, EU is equally as bad as NA. The community hates on NA players irrationally. There are just as many garbage players and deck builders on EU as there are on NA. This is definitely a hot take, and I think a lot of people on EU will be unhappy to hear this, but it's totally true. The metas on NA and EU are slightly different, and so moving from one server to the other will feel like a change from normal to unusual. Anything outside of what you usually see is going to feel wrong and bad. But in terms of the gameplay, everybody outside of the top layer of players on both EU and NA are just terrible, in my opinion. If you're playing on Bronze 10 to Diamond 1 ladder, you can't really expect to play good players on EU or NA, so the comparison is kind of worthless. But if you look at the top level of players, I would say that EU supports just a couple more good players than NA, but it's really close and there are a lot of incredible players on NA. The Modified says, Blizzard should revert all nerfs and let Wild be Wild. If those cards are still in Basic and Classic, they should be Hall of Famed. This is a take I see extremely frequently, and I don't know if it's serious or if it's just trolling. But if you look at some of the terrible design decisions Blizzard has made over the years, Wild would not be the enjoyable game you see today. If you think about some of the worst cards they've printed over the years and you never changed any of them, pretty much every Wild game would be decided by turn 4. And there are already a lot of games decided by turn 4, but that's with decks that have that strategy and require usually quite a big high roll to do so. And indeed, there are still counters to most of those aggressive strategies. Think about all the things that you've ever really hated in Wild Hearthstone history and just bring them all back. The high rolls we're talking about: 4 mana Barnes, 5 mana Pocket Galaxy, 2 mana Wild Growth, and 5 mana Nourish, 9 mana Aviana. Even just some of the old Hearthstone cards would be absolutely ridiculous today, like Undertaker. I think people say they want this, but they don't realize the absolute crazy number of cards that would just ruin the game if they were brought back. And Gylatron says, Shen Vala isn't better than second Arcane Intellect in Quest Mage. Now, this one is just downright not true. The problem with Quest Mage, and the only weakness it has, is against aggro decks. So if you think about it, then what improves the deck the most is cards that beat aggro even more, and Shen Vala is an amazing source of tempo against aggro decks where you wouldn't otherwise find it. Basically, it's a third Flamewaker that's situationally better and can even be cheesed out with Elemental Evocation. There's just no way to say that it doesn't make the deck better, because it improves your worst matchups and it's still really solid against control. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments section if you like this video and if you'd like to see more of it. If you want to participate in the next Let's Argue video, make sure to follow me on Twitter. You can also catch me live on Twitch every single night at 12 o'clock PST, and you can join my Discord for all the deck lists you see in my videos and to be part of the community. And on a final note, if you have an unused Twitch Prime subscription, consider donating it on Twitch. Thank you guys very much, and I'll see you on ladder.